Welcome to this episode of Consider It Blacklit. I am Kim Singleton, your host, and for those of you tuning in for the first time, Consider It Blacklit highlights films, television programs, and stage plays featuring African Americans up front and behind the scenes. We also discuss social issues as it relates to some of these programs and how they may or may not impact our communities. So thank you for tuning in, and we hope you continue to tune in each week. Today, it is my pleasure to have a very special guest. She is a film festival programmer and curator, Karen McMullen. Welcome, Karen.
Hi, Kim. How are you doing?
Good. I'm so happy that you are here. I know we have a mutual friend, and he's been trying to get us connected, so I'm glad we finally got to do that.
Me too.
So tell our audience about your background.
Sure. Let's see, how far back do we want to go?
However far back you want to go. We want to know all about you, all up in your applesauce, girl.
That's funny. Let's see. Well, I grew up in Connecticut. I moved to New York after college, and I was going to be a lawyer. So I was working in a law firm and slowly starting to hate it, but didn't really know what else to do. At the same time, I was a member of the Black Filmmaker Foundation that was started by Warrington and Reggie Hudlin.
I remember that.
Do you?
I don't want to go off on a tangent, but they used to have the best screenings and events back in the day.
They did.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So somehow I found them, and after work I would go to the screenings, and sometimes I'd work on these films, watch these films, and like, oh my God, this film is amazing. Like, who are these people? This whole, subculture of Black people making films. And it never occurred to me. I always grew up loving movies. My father was a big movie fan, and we'd go a lot. And it just never occurred to me to work in the film industry. So I started volunteering everywhere. I laid dolly tracks on NYU films. I held the boom. I took a screenwriting class. I was an extra in Spike Lee movies. Anything just to get in to the industry. And I was volunteering in an editing room, and the assistant editor left on maternity leave, and since I was there, they hired me, and that's how it all started.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's a good story. So I read that you went to Brown University. Tell us how your education there helped you in what you do now.
Well, I didn't take any film classes at Brown. I was studying pre-law, so I took international relations, which is a little bit of everything, poli-sci, economics, history, and languages, and I also minored in French. So it was a very broad liberal arts education. It taught me to write well. It taught me to think differently. I feel like the biggest benefit of a liberal arts education is being taught how to think, and just be open-minded and be able to attack things from different vantage points. So I'm very happy I went there. I loved Brown, and I go back for all my reunions.
So you mentioned that you were an editor.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what it was like to work on some of those iconic films. Let's start with Malcolm X. What did you do on that movie? And tell me just what that experience was like, because that's one of my favorite movies, actually.
Oh, yeah. Well, I actually worked on two Malcolm X's. It was Malcolm X heavy in the early 90s. So I worked at Blackside on the documentary Malcolm X Make It Plain, directed by Orlando Bagwell. And that's the same house that did the Eyes on the Prize series. So that was an amazing experience working up there. And I also worked on Spike Lee's Malcolm X. And at the time, all the editing, or most of the editing that was going on in New York City, took place in the Brill Building. And as Boomerang was finishing up, I really wanted to work with Spike. And so I wrote him letters. This was the day of writing letters. I go by his office, called him on the phone. I really stalked him. All my friends who knew him, I asked them to put in a good word for me. And finally he was like, okay, you can work with me. And he was doing sound editing at the time, and I wanted to work in picture editing, and he was like, take it or leave it. I was like, okay, I'll take it. So, I worked in the ADR department. I was a assistant editor or apprentice editor, I can't remember which. But it was great. ADR is when the cast comes in to re-record their lines. So, it was a week or two of working with Denzel Washington very closely very close, getting his lunch and getting his SAG signatures. Angela Bassett, like all the people that are in the film come through. So that was really a fun experience.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
I kind of want to circle back to like your responsibilities as a sound editor versus a film editor, because a lot of students and a lot of people who want to get into the industry, they look at this show, just to learn about different things. So if someone wanted to be a sound editor or a film editor, what kind of training would you recommend that they have?
Well, I worked for free. My Brown education got me nothing other than, actually, the person who hired me for Boomerang was a Brown alumni, so I think that might have had a little something
a little
to
networking,
do. A
little.
But I say this all the time, and I get pushback, but you can, volunteer. I got hired for my first job because I was in the editing room, and when they look around, they need to hire someone. If you've been there doing the work, they're going to hire you. I will also say that after decades in the industry, I've never gotten a job just based on my resume. It's always, aside for that first one at Boomerang, it's always been word of mouth. So just get your foot in the door. So volunteer. You don't have to volunteer for 40 hours a week for 52 weeks, but help out on the weekends, get to know people. And, if people like you, they will hire you. So your reputation, your work ethic matter as much as anything you know. You can know the machines backwards and forwards. You can learn them on YouTube. You absolutely can. But whether you're someone people want to have on their team is only going to be determined when they work with you. So for picture editors, it's a longer job. You are starting for feature films, you're starting as the film is being shot. Same for documentaries often. And so it's a very lucrative gig. Everybody wants to be a director or a DP or these glamorous things. Editing is a very long and well-paying job. So if you're inclined to do it, I would say do it. And you see all the scenes that are shot, and you pick the best pieces and you put them together. So I like puzzles and storytelling. So working as an editor really, was very fun to me, a picture editor. I wasn't interested in sound, like I was saying, but sound is really a fascinating component. And as I've gone on, I've realized that people will forgive bad picture more than bad sound. If something sounds bad or you can't hear it or there's a lot of noise, you'll turn it off. You'll forgive something that's out of focus. And you can also create so much more in sound editing than you would think, with background noises and the addition of sound and sound effects and addition of music, voiceover. You can really shape the outcome of the piece.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's
Sure.
very, very useful information. But let's get back to your movies. Now, you said you worked on Boomerang.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my favorite movies, too, with Robin Givens and Eddie Murphy.
And
I just
Halle
like that
Berry.
whole storyline. What was that like?
That was a unique experience. It was my first feature film experience, and it was one of the highlights of my career. Reggie Hudlin, the director, was intentional about having an all-black cast. All-black cast as we know, but all-black crew, which is very rare. So from the DP to the editor to everybody on set, everybody in the editing room. So it was really fun. It was back when people were still shooting on film, so there's about 4 or 5 people in the editing room, and we would, sync up the dailies and take them down to the screening room every day. And, it was a very good education. I was an apprentice, and it really was an apprentice education because I got to learn because I was in the room with the director and the editor and the assistant editor and hear them talking about what worked, and the producer would come in and you could hear them talk about what they're trying to achieve and whether they actually captured it on film. So that was
good.
phenomenal.
I think that's a good point that you made because, sometimes when people go for these different jobs, they want all this responsibility, but you're saying sometimes just being in the room will help you learn and help you grow. So that's a good point to bring out. Yeah.
It's so true. Like just listening to what's going on, not being on your phone. We didn't have phones back then, so it wasn't an option. But to listen to what's going on and what the higher ups are doing is really important.
Yeah, it is, it is. So you also worked on one of my other favorite films is A Bronx Tale. What was that like?
So that was a very short gig. You did your research, Kim. That was a very short gig. Again, it was on film, and it was just a couple weeks in the editing room at the Tribeca Film Center down in Tribeca. And there was one day then Robert De Niro and Chaz Palminteri came in, and my knees were knocking. I'm not a big, celebrity hound or anything, and a lot of celebs have come around while I've been working on film, but De Niro kind of shook me a little bit.
Oh, really? What was he like? Like, what was his demeanor like when he came in the room?
Well, honestly, he had seen me at an event months before, and he didn't say anything. Chaz Palminteri was also there, and Chaz was chatting away, and De Niro was just sitting there, and finally he opens his mouth and he says, "I saw you before. You were at that event at the Sheraton." I was like, what? That was a big ego boost, and that was the beginning and the end of my relationship with Robert De Niro.
Oh, that's very interesting. Any other movies you worked on that may not have mentioned that really kind of were a highlight for you?
Well, after Malcolm X, I went on to work on a lot of other Spike Lee movies. I worked on, in the sound department, I worked on He Got Game and Get on the Bus and Crooklyn. And I was an extra in Mo Better Blues, but that was before all of it. But yeah, it was great working with Spike. He's a really interesting guy, and he brought a lot of Black people into the film industry. Love him, hate him, like his films or not. I really give my props to him for bringing a lot of people along.
Yeah, because a lot of times we just need access.
Yeah.
However we can get it.
Yeah, and a lot of the folks still working in this industry now came through Spike.
So he did a good job.
He did.
So of all the movies that you worked on, which were some of your favorites, and tell us why?
Well, I mentioned Boomerang with the all-black crew. That was super fun. Working on the other Malcolm X, the documentary in Boston, was really impactful. I moved there for a year, and we worked 6 days a week, and it was really intense, long hours. But it was a very small crew and a very collaborative crew, and they had been working on it for years before I got there. But we really just got to sit, and we would rewatch scenes and watch outtakes, and we had access to interviews from Ozzie Davis and Ruby Dee and Sonia Sanchez, and just like all these amazing people who had crossed paths with Malcolm X. And we were just really clear how important it was to tell the story correctly. And I learned a lot about the care and the integrity that you need to put into making a film. And it was very moving to me. I'm really proud to have been part of that team.
Let's talk about your life as a festival director. How did you make that transition to work with film festivals?
So I worked for years as an editor, and I got tired of doing it. It was great, but I just got tired of sitting in the dark in my little chair and wanted to do something else. So editors make really good directors because they know what the end product needs to be. So those people who make that transition, they're in good stead. But I didn't want to be a director. I didn't have any stories that I was compelled to tell. And somebody said, "Well, why don't you become a programmer?" And I was like, "Well, what's that?" And they said, "Programmers are the people that choose all the films that go into a film festival." So it's a similar skill to be able to watch a lot of footage and pick out the best stuff, which is what editors do, to watch a bunch of films and pick out the best films to go into a festival. So I started volunteering again. Whenever I make a job change, I just start at the bottom, Brown degree or not. I'm getting Starbucks coffee and just learning the ropes. And so, yeah, I just started volunteering at film festivals. I volunteered at the African Film Festival in New York at Lincoln Center, which is still going on. It's a wonderful festival. And I volunteered at Doc NYC, where I still am a programmer, and worked at lots of others in between.
Mm-hmm. So talk about some of the challenges of being a festival programmer.
Well, at this point in my career, I know a lot of people. I know a lot of filmmakers that I've worked with. I know a lot of filmmakers whose films I've shown just from going to festivals, good friends of mine are filmmakers. And I can't just program people's films that I like. It's not about me. It's not about whether, you know, I love you or not. It's about whether your film is going to work in the program. So sometimes filmmakers think, well, I was in the festival last year, so if I have another film, put it in. You're like, well, it doesn't work like that. I'm also not the only programmer, so there's always, you know, 6 to 10 programmers, and we discuss what should belong in the festival, and it's a collaborative job, so that gets hard. Also, there are always more films, more really good films than can fit in the festival, so programmers always see films that they fall in love with, and they just don't have room. You have a 3, 4, 5 day festival, you can't program, you know, 500 films. Right. So making those hard calls is difficult.
Yeah. So tell me, what's rewarding about being a festival director or curator?
When it finally comes together and you've picked the best films that you think, or the best films you can fit, and people come and they see the film, and they come up to you afterwards and like, you know, I've worked 10 years on this film, you know, this is my dream festival, I'm so happy to be here, and the cast and crew get to show their film to a live audience for the first time is really, it's really amazingly rewarding, especially coming from being an editor, knowing how hard filmmakers work, knowing how much of their blood and sweat is on the screen. When they finally get their moment to shine, it's really fab.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So as you're looking at films, have you ever seen a film and you knew right away it was going to win some kind of an award?
Yeah, there are. Like when you're screening, so for a festival, we usually program about 10% of what we get. You know, you get 1,000 submissions, you're going to program 100 films, more or less. And within those numbers, within that 1,000, about this many are really, you know, people just shoot their cat for 45 minutes. We're like, okay, that's... and there are this many that are amazing, and everything else is, you know, good, you know. Mm-hmm. But the amazing ones, when you see something that no one has ever seen before, and you know that you're going to get a chance to introduce it to the public, yeah, it's a great feeling. Wow. But sometimes you fall in love with this film. You're like, oh my God, I can't wait to show it to my fellow programmers. And they're like, nah. You know, you're like, what? You know?
Yeah, because it touches you in a way that it may not touch them. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and that's the other thing that people should keep in mind, you know, filmmakers and audiences. You know, we all know there are films that people have told you, oh my God, you have to see this, and you see it and you're like, hated it. So, and it's the same with programmers. It's something that really resonates with me, might leave you cold. So
let me ask you this. As a programmer, what is it that you look for in films?
It's not, you know, it's not a hard and fast formula. I like films that tell a real story. I like people, by and large, I like people from the community to make the films that they're from. When that doesn't happen, you often run into problems of not getting it quite right. Mm-hmm. You know, there have been, you know, for example, when I was working at Tribeca, there was this indigenous film that I thought was amazing, and I showed it to a fellow programmer who was Native American, and he said, no, it's full of stereotypes, it's really offensive, it's inauthentic. I was like, thank you. I'm not from that community, so I couldn't recognize it. So authenticity is important. A new story, it's nice to see stuff we haven't seen before. You know, people who, I really like something that is your story. Like you weren't compromising. You can't make your film by committee. You can't, you know, get your mom's input and your best friend's input and compromise and make a kind of mushy thing. I like people like, you know, this is my film, like it or not. You know, I might not like it, but another programmer might really resonate with what you're putting, you know, what you're making, if you are making it true to your vision.
Okay. So let me ask you this. You had talked about the Robert De Niro scenario, but Are there any other memorable moments, whether you were an editor or a festival director, that really kind of stand out to you? Like, I like to hear about little interesting stories.
Oh, let's see. There are many. One of the most moving to me, though, was when I worked at Tribeca. I was a programmer there for 2 years, and they had a Juneteenth line of programming. And I was a features programmer. Most big festivals separate one team chooses the feature films and the other team chooses the short films. I was a feature programmer. I was the head of the U.S. features department. And so we needed a block of short films. And so we asked the shorts team to give us some. And the films they picked were about Black people, but not necessarily American Black people, meaning they were done by Afro-Germans. And there was police brutality, there was decapitation, there was, a lot of incarceration, just all these tropes. And I was like, you know what, I have a lot to do, but let me take this on. So I went through all the shorts and came up with this really lovely program that I was so proud of. It was all documentary shorts about Black creatives. And it was a wonderful screening. It was a full house. It was a long-standing ovation, which you usually don't get for a shorts program. But I just know that the audience was really happy to see just 90 minutes of Black creativity, brilliance, excellence, joy, beauty. Yeah, that was really satisfying.
Wow. So you're an example of why it's important for people who look like us to be in the room.
For sure.
Because that would not have happened if you weren't there and you didn't say, wait a minute, let me do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those were not Juneteenth empowering shorts that were being selected. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about some of the other festivals that you've worked with. I think I read that you worked at Sundance also.
I was a screener at Sundance. A lot of people in programming work at multiple jobs. Programming does not pay very well. I'm resting on the things I acquired, the assets I acquired as an editor with a real salary now that I'm a programmer. But most programmers kind of work around. It's very few festivals are year-round. Tribeca is now, but most of them aren't. So once you finish your festival run, you have some months off, so then you would typically go work at another festival. So yes, I was a screener at Sundance for some years. I worked at the Nantucket Film Festival earlier in my career. I worked at the African Film Festival, as I mentioned. I started selling T-shirts in the lobby, and then the director, this wonderful woman named Mahin Bonetti, found out I could speak French, so I ended up doing Q&As. I did a wonderful Q&A with Melvin Van Peebles, who was a character. And then I worked at Doc NYC as a volunteer, where I still am. I worked at Tribeca for a few years. I was the lead curator at New Voices in Black Cinema, which was a wonderful series at BAM for a few years. And I was the festival director and head of programming at Urban World for 3 years.
I like how you drop these little nuggets about yourself. You're like, oh, I spoke French, so
I told you I was a French major at Brown.
Yeah, but okay, you were a French major.
Yeah,
but
the French part was easy. Melvin Van Peebles was a character, man. He gave me a hard time.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
What kind of hard time was he giving you?
Well, I was trying to speak French. I'm not a native French speaker, so I'm trying to translate. He had produced a series of Afro-French shorts. So it was a bunch of filmmakers who, some spoke English, some didn't. So that's why I was translating. And so it was this bilingual thing, and Melvin wasn't hearing very well at the time. He's like, what? And I was like, I can't, like, what? And he would start to answer the question before I could translate it. And yeah, it was kind of funny. I was pretty new to moderating at that point, and to do it in French with the icon. And I was so nervous to be, talking to him too. I think he's amazing.
Yeah, he's an icon.
He's
himself.
an icon,
Yeah.
and I was kind of in over my head on that one.
He was in a character. My story about Melvin is that he used to live near where I worked, because I worked at 57th Street at CVS. And I will always see him walking in the morning with these little shirts. And then he stopped and looked at me one time like, "You following me?" I'm like, "No, I just worked down the street." But he's definitely a character.
That's funny.
Yeah, yeah. So is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience related to being an editor, being a festival programmer and curator, or just any advice you would give someone who wanted to be in this industry?
If you want to be in the industry, stalk Spike now. But do reach out. You know, I know a lot of young people who have this fear of talking on the phone or something. You know, there's some craziness, and you're not gonna get very far if you're too afraid to approach people. And people are open. You know, and people like free work. If you go up to somebody, you know, find out who is shooting in your hometown. People shoot a lot in the Northeast, but they shoot everywhere. Find out, go to your film office in your town, find out what's being shot, if your favorite TV show or your favorite film or something. And go down to the set or write to the production person and say, "Hey, I'm, a big fan. Can I work for a few days? Do you need any help? What do you need? You know, I've driven vans. I've, done craft services. I've done anything. You know, don't be proud. Nobody cares if you went to NYU or Columbia or Brown or, Brooklyn Tech. People don't care. So if you can be of use, get yourself on the set and be of use. Do your homework, watch this person's movies. Be sincere. I really do like your work and I want to work with you. And it'll come.
Yes. And also, put that phone down. I've been in situations where I've had people work with me and I think they're paying attention and I look around and they're on their phone and I'm like, "Are you helping?"
It's
yeah,
really
so I
terrible.
think that's very important to let people know that when you do volunteer, be present, be engaged in what's going on.
You're exactly right. And because most people are on the phone, if you are not on your phone, you're going to instantly rise to the top.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this information about your journey as an editor coming from Brown University and not studying that and transitioning into being a film festival programmer and a curator. So thank you for sharing that, and I'm just so glad we were able to connect.
Me too.
So audience, thank you for joining us today, and until next time, consider yourself Blacklit.